He built empires from steel and silence, but on the night she walked into his world, everything he believed began to crack. David Miller stood at the head of a boardroom on the 60th floor, surrounded by men in tailored suits and women draped in ambition. The city of Chicago glittered below him like a kingdom he had conquered with his own hands. 15 years. 15 years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, and ruthless decisions had brought him here, to the edge of the deal that would immortalize his name, the Sterling Corporation merger. $4 billion. A contract so flawless it had taken an army of lawyers 6 months to draft. And beside him, with a hand resting on his shoulder like a brother's blessing, stood Leandro Vega, his best friend since college, his partner through every storm, the man he'd trusted more than anyone alive. "This is it, David," Leandro murmured, his voice smooth as silk. "Once you sign, we won't just lead the market, we'll own it." David nodded slowly, though something inside him felt strangely hollow. He picked up the golden pen, heavy with symbolism, and lowered it toward the page. Around him, champagne bubbled in crystal glasses. Executives leaned forward, eyes gleaming with greed disguised as admiration. And then, the door opened. It was nothing, just a quiet creak. A woman in a grey cleaning uniform wheeled a cart inside, her eyes downcast, her movements careful and apologetic. Her name tag read, Ana Santos. No one noticed her. No one ever did. Except David. He glanced up, his pen hovering above the contract. She moved toward the trash bin near his chair, her dark hair tied back, her face composed in that universal mask of invisibility worn by those the world forgets. "Sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll just be a moment." The executives didn't even pause their laughter, but as Anna bent down to remove the trash bag, she leaned closer to David, so close her breath brushed his ear, and spoke 3 words that would shatter his entire world. "Don't sign. It's a trap." The pen slipped from David's fingers and clattered softly against the mahogany table. "Before we continue, let me ask you something important. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that the thought of their betrayal felt impossible? Like losing gravity itself? This isn't just another love story. This is a story about the courage to see the truth when everyone you trust is lying. About the woman no one saw coming, and the man who almost lost everything because he was too blind to look. If you believe that real love begins with honesty, hit like and subscribe before we go any further. Because what happens next will change how you see loyalty, power, and the people we ignore every single day. David froze. His chest tightened. The words echoed in his mind like thunder splitting silence. "Don't sign, it's a trap." He turned his head sharply, but Anna had already straightened, her expression unreadable, her hands moving with practiced calm as she tied the trash bag. Without a word, she pushed her cart toward the door and disappeared into the hallway, quiet as a ghost. But David couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "David." Leandro's voice cut through the fog, sharp and questioning. "Everything all right?" Javier Sterling, the representative across the table, frowned. "Mr. Miller, is there a problem? The market is waiting. We need your signature." David's gaze flickered from the contract to Leandro's face, familiar, warm, reassuring, and then to the door where the cleaning lady had vanished. The champagne, the laughter, the promises of power. Suddenly, they all felt hollow, poisoned. He pushed back his chair abruptly, his voice steady but cold. "I need 5 minutes." The room erupted in confusion. Leandro's smile faltered. his eyes narrowing. 5 minutes. David, this isn't the time for... It's my company, David said, his tone like ice. And I said 5 minutes. He walked out before anyone could stop him. The hallway outside was silent, the hum of the city distant through floor-to-ceiling glass. He spotted her, Anna, pushing her cart slowly down the corridor, her shoulders tense, her movements deliberate. She knew he would follow. You. His voice echoed off the walls. She stopped, but didn't turn. David closed the distance quickly, his tall frame radiating authority, his blue eyes blazing. What did you just say to me in there? Anna turned slowly, and for the first time he truly saw her face. Not the uniform, not the invisibility. Her. Dark eyes that held something he didn't expect. Quiet strength, defiance wrapped in fear. I said don't sign, she replied, her voice soft but steady. Because if you do, you'll lose everything. David's pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed at him to dismiss her. She was a janitor, a stranger, nobody. But something in her gaze, something raw and unshakable, stopped him cold. You think I'm going to believe the word of a cleaning lady over my partner of 15 years? His voice was low, dangerous. You should, Anna said simply, because I've seen things, heard things, things no one else noticed because they don't see people like me. David stepped closer, his jaw tight. If you're lying, I'll make sure you never work in this city again. Anna swallowed hard but didn't flinch. Then so be it. I'd rather lose my job than watch you lose your life's work. Silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. Behind him, the future he had built for years waited on a single signature. In front of him, a woman with nothing to gain and everything to lose was daring to save him. Finally, his voice softened, though suspicion still burned in his eyes. Do you have proof? Anna nodded. I do. But not here. Meet me tonight. 7 o'clock. Break room on the 12th floor. I'll show you everything. She turned then, pushing her cart away, her back straight, her head high. And though she walked like a servant, in that moment she carried herself like someone holding the power to change the world. David remained frozen in the hallway, his reflection trembling in the glass beside him. For the first time in his life, David Miller, the man who never doubted, hesitated, not because of numbers, not because of risk, but because of a whisper from a woman the world refused to see. And that was the moment everything changed. The skyscraper lights reflected across Chicago as the night deepened, the city alive with secrets. In his penthouse office, David Miller sat behind his glass desk staring at the merger documents. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt haunted. Don't sign. It's a trap. Her words circled his mind like vultures. He glanced at the clock. 6:58. Against every fiber of logic, against everything he had built his life upon, he rose and left the office. His footsteps echoed through empty corridors until he reached the 12th floor. The break room door stood slightly ajar, fluorescent light spilling into the darkened hallway. He pushed it open. Anna Santos sat at a small round table, her grey uniform stark against the sterile white walls. Her posture was rigid, alert. A worn backpack rested on her lap like armor. You came, she said softly, relief and fear mingling in her voice. David closed the door behind him, his expression unreadable. Convince me. The command hung in the air, cold, authoritative, the voice of a man used to control. But beneath it, something trembled. Doubt. the most dangerous emotion for a man like him. Anna opened her backpack with trembling hands and pulled out her phone. 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning late. I heard voices in Leandro's office. I recorded parts of it. She pressed play. The room filled with familiar voices, smooth, confident, deadly. Leandro. Once he signs, we'll have full control. David suspects nothing. He's too naive, too trusting. By the time he realizes, it'll be too late. David's chest constricted. The voice was unmistakable. His best friend, his brother. Then another voice, softer, feminine, laced with cruel amusement. Sophia. Are you sure? David trusted me once before. He won't see it coming. The blood drained from David's face. Sofia Delgado, the woman who had claimed to love him 2 years ago, the woman who had left because they were too different. Now he understood what different meant. She had chosen his fortune over his heart, and his best friend over loyalty. His hand clenched into a fist. Where did you get this? I told you I was cleaning. They didn't know I was there. Anna scrolled through her phone, showing him photos, blurry but damning. Documents with altered clauses. Bank transfers into offshore accounts. Signatures that didn't match the originals. They've rewritten the deal, she continued, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was revealing. The contract you saw gives you majority control, but the real version strips you of everything. 80% of your assets transfer to a shell corporation. Shareholders, Leandro Vega and Sofia Delgado. David grabbed the phone, his sharp eyes scanning every detail. The legal terms. The hidden addendums. The banking records showing $23 million already siphoned from his accounts under the guise of preparatory transfers. His world tilted. 15 years, he whispered, more to himself than to her. 15 years of friendship, of trust, of brotherhood. Anna watched him carefully, her dark eyes soft with something that looked like understanding, like she knew exactly what betrayal felt like. Why? David's voice cracked as he turned to her. Why risk everything for me? You don't even know me. For the first time, Anna's composure faltered. She bit her lip, hesitating. Because I know what betrayal feels like. And because... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Because I've been watching you for months. You're different from the others here. You say good morning to the security guards. You hold the elevator for the mailroom staff. You treat people like they matter, even people like me. David's breath caught. He wanted to dismiss her words, to throw her out and pretend this nightmare wasn't real. But something in her eyes anchored him. Something raw, something true. His voice dropped, quieter now, probing. Who are you really, Anna? Her silence stretched long enough to be painful. Then, reluctantly, she whispered, I wasn't always a cleaning lady. David frowned, waiting. I studied business administration at Northwestern, she continued, her voice tight with old wounds. Worked for McKinsey Consulting for 2 years. I know contracts, clauses, financial structures. I know what I saw in those documents. Then why? Because when I tried to advance, they told me I didn't fit the culture. Her voice hardened. A Latina woman who didn't match their image of power. And then my sister got sick. Maria. Heart condition. I needed insurance, money, stability. So I took whatever job I could find. Her confession cut through him sharper than any betrayal. He pictured her, educated, brilliant, capable, mopping floors at midnight not because she lacked talent, but because the world had cornered her. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, The powerful CEO and the invisible woman who wasn't truly invisible at all. "If this is real," David said finally, his voice raw, "if Leandro is truly doing this to me—" He paused, pain flickering across his face. "He was my brother. We built everything together." Anna's eyes softened. Sometimes money changes people, or maybe it just reveals who they always were. David turned back to her, studying her face, the strength in her jaw, the fire in her eyes, the quiet dignity she wore like armor. Something stirred in him that he couldn't name. Respect, curiosity, and something deeper, something dangerous. But before he could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Anna's eyes widened. She shoved her phone back into her bag with frantic speed. David straightened, his CEO mask snapping into place just as the door swung open. Leandro Vega stood there, perfectly composed, his tailored suit immaculate, his smile easy, but his eyes sharp, calculating, scanning the room like a predator sensing prey. "David," he said smoothly, "what are you doing here so late? And with—" His gaze slid to Anna, narrowing ever so slightly. "The cleaning staff?" David's heartbeat thundered in his chest. Anna kept her eyes down, pretending to wipe the table, every muscle in her body tense. "Just checking on some details," David replied, his voice casual, almost bored. "You know how particular I can be." Leandro chuckled, but the sound was cold. "Since when do you personally supervise the janitorial team?" "Since I decided to pay more attention to the foundation of this company," David countered, forcing a small smile. "After all, isn't that what you always tell me? Details matter." Leandro's lips curved, but his eyes remained ice. "Speaking of details, did you finalize your thoughts on tomorrow's signing? Sterling is expecting your answer by noon." "I'll have it," David said firmly. Leandro glanced once more at Anna, who continued to act as though she hadn't heard a single word. His gaze lingered, too long, too sharp. Then he stepped back. "I'll see you in the morning, brother." The door clicked shut. For a long moment, silence pressed heavy in the room. David finally turned back to Anna, his face grim. "He knows something's wrong." Anna nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Then we don't have much time." David studied her, this woman who had risked everything to save him from his own blindness. And for the first time in his carefully controlled life, he felt something unfamiliar. Not just gratitude, trust. "If you're right," he said quietly, "then this is war, and I'll need your help." Anna met his gaze, unflinching. "Then I'll fight beside you. But if we're doing this, we do it all the way. No more hesitation." David extended his hand, not as a CEO to an employee, but as an equal to an equal. Anna stared at his hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and shook it. The pact was sealed. But trust is fragile, and betrayal has many faces. The morning sun rose over Chicago, casting a golden glow across the city's glass towers. But inside David Miller's penthouse, the light brought no warmth. He sat at the edge of his bed, his head in his hands, haunted by voices that wouldn't fade. Leandro's smooth betrayal, Sophia's cruel laughter, Anna's trembling whisper. On his desk lay two versions of the same future. One was the official merger contract, clean, promising, the document Sterling had presented with pride. The other, hidden in the photographs Anna had shown him, revealed something darker: forged clauses, buried debts, and the systematic theft of everything he had built. 15 years of sacrifice, 15 years of trust. Could it all have been a lie? He thought of Anna. The way her eyes had held his, steady, unflinching, even when her job and dignity hung by a thread. She had risked everything to warn him, and yet she was just a cleaning lady, wasn't she? No, she was far more than that. By mid-morning, David made a decision. He needed to understand her, not just her evidence, but her truth. He found her file in the employee database, minimal information, a P.O. box address and a Southside zip code that marked her as someone from a world he had never truly seen. He drove there himself, leaving behind the chauffeur and the luxury. His BMW felt out of place as it rolled through streets lined with old brick buildings, small shops with hand-painted signs in Spanish, and children playing on cracked sidewalks. This was Chicago too, but a Chicago invisible from the 60th floor. He found the address, 847 Lincoln Street, a worn building with peeling paint and windows patched with tape. He climbed the narrow stairs to apartment 2B and knocked. Inside, Anna froze. She recognized that knock, controlled, firm, unmistakable. She opened the door just a crack, the chain still latched. Her eyes were tired, red-rimmed. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice cold. "Anna," David said quietly, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before, humility. "I need to talk. Not as your boss, as someone who owes you the truth." Her heart lurched. Part of her wanted to believe him, but the memory of his silence, of being dragged out in shame, still burned. She started to close the door. "You should go back to your glass tower, Mr. Miller. I don't belong in your world." David pressed his hand gently against the door. "Please, just 5 minutes." A weak voice called from inside. "Anna, who is it?" "Her sister." Maria shuffled into view, her fragile frame leaning against the wall, her face pale but curious. Anna sighed and reluctantly unlatched the chain. David stepped inside. The apartment was small but immaculate. The furniture was old but cared for with love. Family photos lined the walls, smiles from better days, faces full of hope. A vase of fresh flowers sat on the table, their brightness defiant against the worn surroundings. Maria greeted him with a faint smile. "You must be Mr. Miller. Anna talks about you. She says you're different from the others." Anna's cheeks flushed. "Maria, please, you should rest." Maria nodded and disappeared into her room, leaving them alone. David turned back to Anna, his expression heavy. "I checked everything. The forged contracts, the transfers, the recordings, you were right about all of it." Anna's eyes filled with both anger and pain. "And now you come to me? After you let them drag me out in front of everyone? After you said nothing while they destroyed my name?" David's voice broke. "I was a coward. I chose loyalty to a man who betrayed me over loyalty to the truth, and I can't undo that moment. But I can make this right now." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I lost everything because of you, my job, my dignity, and Maria's health coverage." Her voice cracked. "Do you even understand what that means?" "Yes," David said firmly, stepping closer. "I understand. That's why I'm here. I'll clear your name. I'll make sure your sister gets the treatment she needs, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust." Anna turned away, her hands trembling. Part of her wanted to throw him out. Another part, the part that had seen him hesitate in that hallway, the man who had almost chosen her side, longed to believe him. "If you're serious, David Miller," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "then you'd better be ready. Because going up against Leandro and Sophia will cost you everything." David's jaw tightened. Then I'll pay the price. The days that followed became a blur of secrecy and strategy. David and Anna met in quiet corners of the city, small diners where no one recognized him, public libraries where they could work unnoticed, and Anna's modest apartment when Maria slept. Together they pored over documents, tracing financial transfers and legal loopholes. David had never worked so closely with anyone outside his elite circle, and what astonished him most wasn't the depth of Leandro's betrayal. It was Anna's mind. She saw patterns he missed, caught details invisible to him, asked questions that cut straight to the heart of the deception. "You think like a strategist," David said one night, leaning across her kitchen table covered in files. "You should be in a boardroom, not scrubbing floors." Anna smirked bitterly. "Boardrooms don't open their doors for people like me. That's why I stopped knocking." David studied her in silence. For the first time, he realized how blind he had been, not just to Leandro's betrayal, but to the struggles of people he passed every day without seeing. As they worked, something unspoken grew between them. Late nights turned into conversations, not just about contracts, but about dreams, fears, and the scars they both carried. David found himself captivated by the strength in her eyes, the way she refused to break even when the world crushed her. And Anna, despite her anger, began to see beyond the billionaire mask, a man torn apart, fighting to reclaim what little truth remained. One evening, Maria emerged from her room with a sketch pad. "I used to paint," she said softly, showing them a watercolor of the Chicago skyline. "Beautiful, hopeful, alive." "You're talented," David said, genuinely moved. Maria smiled sadly. "I was going to art school before I got sick." Anna's eyes filled with tears. She squeezed her sister's hand. "You'll paint again, Carino, I promise." David watched them, and something inside him shifted. He had spent 15 years chasing power, believing it was the measure of success. But here, in this small apartment with two sisters who had almost nothing yet held each other with such fierce love, he finally understood what he had been missing: humanity. Later that night, after Maria had gone to bed, Anna and David stood on the small balcony overlooking the neighborhood. The sounds of laughter and music drifted up from the street below. Life, raw and real. "You've lived in a different world than I have," Anna said quietly. "Yes," David admitted. "And I'm beginning to think mine was smaller." She turned to him, surprised. "You have something I lost a long time ago," he continued. "You have people who matter more than money, a sister who depends on you, a purpose beyond profit." Anna's breath caught. "You had that too once, didn't you?" David nodded slowly. "My mother. She cleaned houses to put me through college. She believed in me when no one else did." His voice grew heavy. "She died 5 years ago, and I was so busy building an empire that I missed her final months." Anna's hand moved instinctively, resting gently on his arm. "She would have been proud of what you built." "Maybe," David whispered, "but I think she would have been disappointed in what I became." They stood there in silence, two souls from different worlds bound by a story that was rewriting both their lives. And in that silence, something fragile began to bloom, something neither dared to name yet: trust, understanding, and the first whisper of love. But shadows were closing in, and the enemy never sleeps. Leandro Vega stood in his penthouse office, swirling whiskey in a crystal glass, his eyes fixed on the city lights below. But his mind was elsewhere, on David Miller, his so-called brother who had been acting strange for days. The hesitation at the signing, the unexplained absences, the questions that felt more like accusations. Something had changed, and Leandro knew exactly who to blame. Sofia Delgado entered without knocking, her heels clicking against marble. She wore a black dress that hugged her curves like a weapon, her red lips curved in a knowing smile. "He's protecting her," she said, pouring herself a drink. "I saw him yesterday. South Side. That's not David's world. He was visiting her." Leandro's jaw clenched. "The cleaning woman. She's not as harmless as she looks," Sofia continued, her voice laced with venom. "She's smart, educated. And if David is listening to her, then she's dangerous." Leandro slammed his glass onto the counter, the sound sharp as a gunshot. "Then we eliminate the problem, before she ruins everything." A plan began to form, cruel, efficient, unstoppable. Within 2 days, invitations were sent across Chicago's elite circles, a grand gala to celebrate the impending Sterling merger. Politicians, celebrities, business moguls, everyone who mattered received the gold-embossed card. But the true purpose of the event was something else entirely. When the invitation arrived at David's penthouse, he brought it straight to Anna. She read it carefully, her brow furrowed with concern. "They want to corner you," she said. "Force you to sign publicly. Once your name is on that contract in front of the world, there's no walking away." David's eyes darkened. "Then we don't walk away. We turn their trap into ours." Anna hesitated. "What do you mean?" "We let them think they've won," David explained, his voice steady, controlled. "We walk into that party like nothing is wrong, and then, when the moment comes, we expose the truth in front of everyone." Her breath caught. The image of herself walking beside him into a room full of millionaires felt impossible. "David, I can't. I don't belong there." He stepped closer, his gaze piercing hers. "Anna, you belong wherever the truth belongs. And right now the truth needs you." Her heart raced. She saw in his eyes not the cold CEO who had once failed her, but a man who needed her, not just for strategy, but for strength. "All right," she whispered. "I'll do it." The night before the gala, Anna couldn't sleep. She sat on her balcony, staring at the city lights, fear and determination warring inside her. Maria found her there, wrapped in a blanket. "You're scared," Maria said softly, sitting beside her. "Terrified," Anna admitted. "Of them? Or of him?" Anna turned, surprised. "What do you mean?" Maria smiled gently. "I see the way you look at him, Anna, and the way he looks at you, like you're the only real thing in his world." Anna's cheeks flushed. "It's not like that. This is just business." "Is it?" Maria asked, her eyes knowing. "Because it looks like something else to me. It looks like you're falling for him." Anna opened her mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because deep down she knew Maria was right. Somewhere between the late nights and the whispered confessions, between the fear and the trust, she had begun to feel something she had sworn never to feel for a man like him. Love. But love was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not now. Not when everything was about to explode. The night of the gala arrived. The Grand Chicago Hotel ballroom glittered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers bathed the crowd in golden light. Champagne flowed. The city's elite paraded in gowns and tuxedos, their laughter echoing off marble walls. At the center of it all, Leandro Vega stood like a king, Sofia Delgado at his side, both radiating confidence. Tonight, they would win. Tonight, David Miller would sign away his empire, and no one would be able to stop them. And then the crowd shifted, heads turned, cameras flashed. David Miller had arrived, but he wasn't alone. On his arm walked Ana Santos, dressed in a simple but elegant black gown. Her hair swept back, her chin high, her eyes fierce despite the storm inside her. She felt every stare, every whisper, every judgment, but she held David's arm with quiet strength. Leandro's smile stiffened. Sophia's eyes narrowed like blades. "Ladies and gentlemen," Leandro announced, his voice smooth and powerful, "tonight we celebrate not just a merger, but a new era. And in just moments, Mr. Miller will sign the final agreement." Applause erupted. Cameras swiveled toward the stage. David walked forward, Ana beside him. He placed the contract on the podium, the golden pen beside it. The room held its breath. David picked up the pen slowly, his hand steady, his expression unreadable. Leandro leaned closer, whispering for only him to hear. "Don't be a fool, David. Sign it." David lifted his gaze to the crowd, then to Ana, who stood just off stage. Her eyes met his, full of fire, full of faith. And in that moment, David Miller made his choice. He set the pen down. "My friends," he began, his voice echoing across the ballroom, "tonight we were told we are here to celebrate unity and progress, but I cannot sign this contract." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Leandro's face twisted in fury. "Not because I fear business," David continued, "but because I fear betrayal." He nodded to Ana. With trembling fingers, she handed a USB drive to the technician. Moments later, the ballroom's massive screens lit up. The first recording played, Leandro's voice cold and mocking. "Once he signs, we'll have full control. David suspects nothing. By the time he realizes, it'll be too late." Gasps rippled through the audience. Journalists raised their cameras. Then Sophia's voice followed. "Are you sure? David has trusted me once before. He won't see it coming." All eyes turned to Sophia, whose face paled under the lights. Finally, the documents appeared. Scanned contracts, forged signatures, bank transfers. Proof undeniable. Leandro's composure shattered. He lunged toward David, his voice dripping venom. "You think they'll believe you over me? I made you. Everything you are is because of me." But his words only condemned him further. The crowd recoiled, seeing the monster beneath the mask. David stood tall, calm, his voice carrying the weight of justice. "You built nothing but lies, Leandro, and tonight, those lies end." Security moved in. Sophia tried to slip away but was stopped at the door. Leandro fought, screaming curses, but was dragged from the stage. When the chaos subsided, silence lingered. All eyes turned to Ana. The whispers began. "She saved him. She exposed them. She's the reason he still has his empire." Ana's cheeks flushed, but she lifted her chin unafraid. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. David walked to her, his expression softened. He extended his hand, not as a CEO to an employee, but as a man to the woman who had saved him. "Thank you, Ana. Without you, I would have lost everything." Her eyes filled with tears. "You didn't lose, you fought back." The orchestra began to play softly, as if the world itself had exhaled. David looked into her eyes, and for a moment, nothing else existed. Not the cameras, not the crowd, just them. But then, a voice cut through the moment like a knife. "How touching." They turned. Sophia stood at the entrance, flanked by security, but her eyes burned with hatred. "How you think this is over? You think exposing us is enough?" She smiled cruelly. "David, did you ever wonder how I knew so much about your business? How Leandro always stayed one step ahead?" David's blood ran cold. Sophia's gaze slid to Anna. "It's because someone on the inside was feeding us information. Someone you trusted." Anna's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" Sophia laughed. "Check your sister's medical records, Anna. Check who's been paying for her treatments all along." Anna's world tilted. "No, you're lying." "Am I?" Sophia's smile widened. "Leandro's been covering Maria's hospital bills for months, and in exchange, you've been our eyes and ears in David's world, whether you knew it or not." The room fell silent. David turned to Anna, confusion and betrayal flickering in his eyes. "Anna," he whispered. I didn't know," she stammered, tears streaming down her face. "I swear, I didn't know." But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. Sophia turned and walked away, her laughter echoing through the ballroom. David stood frozen, staring at Anna, the woman he had begun to trust, to love, and suddenly he didn't know what to believe. Anna reached for him, but he stepped back. "I need time," he said quietly, his voice breaking. And then he walked away, leaving her standing alone in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by 1,000 eyes that now saw her not as a hero, but as a question mark. Trust, once broken, is the hardest thing to rebuild. The days after the gala felt like drowning in slow motion. David Miller returned to his penthouse and locked himself away from the world. The city lights that once symbolized his empire now felt like the bars of a cage. He sat in darkness, replaying Sophia's words over and over. "Leandro's been covering Maria's hospital bills for months." Was it true? Had Anna been part of the betrayal all along? Or was this Sophia's final act of cruelty, planting doubt where trust had barely begun to grow? His phone buzzed constantly, board members demanding answers, investors questioning his judgment, the media circling like vultures. But David ignored them all, because the only voice he wanted to hear was the one he had silenced. Anna's. Across the city, Anna sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by medical bills and bank statements. Her hands trembled as she traced every payment, every transaction. Maria sat beside her, pale and weak, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know, Anna. I swear I didn't know where the money was coming from." "I know, Carino," Anna whispered, though her voice was hollow. "I know." The truth was devastating. Leandro had indeed been paying for Maria's treatments, anonymously through a shell foundation. The hospital had never questioned it. Neither had Anna. She had been too desperate, too grateful for the miracle that kept her sister alive. But it wasn't a miracle. It was a trap. They had used her sister's life as leverage, manipulating her without her knowledge. Every document she had photographed, every conversation she had overheard, Leandro had allowed her to find them. He had planted evidence, knowing Anna's conscience would force her to act, knowing she would run to David. The betrayal wasn't that Anna had helped them. It was that they had made her a pawn without her ever knowing she was playing the game. She buried her face in her hands, her body shaking with silent sobs. She had tried to save David, and in doing so, she had become the weapon used against him. And now, he believed she had betrayed him. 3 days passed in agonizing silence. Then, on the 4th morning, a knock came at Anna's door. She opened it to find an elderly woman standing in the hallway, elegantly dressed, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes warm but piercing. "Anna Santos?" the woman asked. "Yes," Anna replied cautiously. "My name is Eleanor Miller. I'm David's aunt." Anna's breath caught. She stepped aside, allowing the woman to enter. Eleanor looked around the small apartment with kind eyes, then turned to Anna. "David sent me to investigate Sophia's claims. I have connections in the medical and financial sectors, so I dug deep." She pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. "Leandro did pay for your sister's treatments, but not because you asked him to. Not because you even knew. He did it to create a paper trail, one that would make you look complicit if anyone ever questioned his actions." Anna's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Bank statements, anonymous donations, a fabricated email thread that made it look like Anna had requested the funds in exchange for corporate information. All of it fake, all of it designed to destroy her credibility. "He knew you were the only real threat," Eleanor continued, "so he tried to eliminate you, not by silencing you, but by making everyone believe you were part of the betrayal." Anna's tears fell freely now. "Does David know this?" Eleanor's expression softened. "Not yet. I came to you first. Because I wanted to see your eyes when you heard the truth, and now I know you're innocent." She reached out and gently squeezed Anna's hand. "David's mother was my sister. She raised him to see people for who they truly are. But somewhere along the way, he forgot that lesson. He built walls so high that he couldn't see the truth even when it stood right in front of him." Eleanor stood, preparing to leave. "But I believe he's remembering now. Give him time, Anna. He'll come back to you." That night, David sat in his office staring at the folder Eleanor had left for him. Every page was a revelation, every document a vindication of Anna's innocence. She hadn't betrayed him. She had been used, just as he had been. His chest tightened with shame and regret. He had abandoned her when she needed him most. He had let doubt poison the one thing that had been real in his carefully constructed world. He thought of her face in the ballroom, the way her eyes had filled with tears, the way she had reached for him and he had pulled away. He had failed her, just as he had failed his mother. David stood abruptly, grabbed his coat, and walked out into the night. The rain began as he drove through the city, heavy drops hammering against the windshield. He parked outside Anna's building and climbed the stairs, his heart pounding with every step. He knocked. The door opened slowly. Hannah stood there in an old sweater and jeans, her eyes red from crying, her face hollow with exhaustion. "David," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, the words tumbling out. "I'm so sorry, Anna. I should have believed you. I should have trusted you. You risked everything to save me, and I repaid you with doubt." Anna's tears fell silently. "I didn't know, David. I swear I didn't know what they were doing." "I know," he said firmly, stepping closer. "I know. Eleanor showed me everything. You were innocent, and I was a fool." For a long moment they simply stood there, two broken people in a broken world, searching for something solid to hold on to. "Why did you come back?" Anna asked quietly. David's voice was raw, vulnerable in a way she had never heard before. "Because I realized something. In a world full of lies, you were the only truth I had. And I almost lost you because I was too afraid to believe it." Anna's breath hitched. "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that someone like you could see something worth saving in someone like me." The rain poured harder, drumming against the windows like a heartbeat. Anna stepped forward, closing the distance between them. You don't need saving, David. You just needed to remember who you were before the world taught you to build walls. David reached out slowly, his hand trembling as he cupped her face. You reminded me. You showed me what I had forgotten. Humanity, honesty, love. Her eyes widened. Love? Yes, he whispered. I love you, Anna. I don't know when it happened. Maybe it was the moment you whispered those 3 words in the boardroom. Maybe it was when you stood beside me, even when the world turned against you. But I know this. I don't want to live in a world where you're not part of my life. Anna's tears fell freely now, but they were no longer tears of pain. They were tears of something fragile, something beautiful. I love you too, she whispered. Even when I was angry, even when you hurt me, I couldn't stop. David pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. And in that small apartment, with the rain washing away the past, 2 souls found what they had been searching for all along: each other. Maria appeared in the doorway, smiling through her own tears. Finally, she said softly, I was beginning to think you 2 would never figure it out. They laughed, broken, relieved, real. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the darkness lifted. But the battle wasn't over, and true love would demand one final test. The weeks that followed were unlike anything David Miller had ever known. For the first time in 15 years, he stopped chasing power and started chasing meaning. Chicago's headlines continued to blaze with scandal. Leandro Vega faced multiple charges: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. His empire crumbled overnight, his name spat out with contempt by the very people who had once courted his favor. Sofia Delgado fled the city, her beauty and charm worthless in a world that now knew her true face. But David didn't revel in their downfall. Instead, he turned inward, and he turned toward Anna. He began visiting her apartment regularly, not as a CEO checking on an asset, but as a man learning what it meant to live simply. He sat at her worn kitchen table, drinking coffee from chipped mugs. He helped Maria with her physical therapy exercises. He listened to Anna's stories about growing up in a neighborhood where everyone knew your name, where wealth was measured not in dollars but in loyalty. One evening, Anna found him standing on her balcony, staring at the neighborhood below. Children played in the street, their laughter rising through the humid air. An elderly man swept his stoop while singing in Spanish. A young couple walked hand in hand, their faces bright with hope despite the poverty surrounding them. "You've been quiet tonight," Anna said, joining him. David didn't turn. "I've been thinking about my mother." Anna waited, sensing he needed space to speak. "She cleaned houses for wealthy families," he continued, his voice distant. "She worked 16-hour days so I could go to college. She never complained, never asked for anything in return." He paused, his jaw tightening. "And when she got sick, I was too busy building my empire to visit her. I told myself I'd make it up to her later, that once the company was stable, I'd have time." His voice cracked, but later never came. "She died alone in a hospital room while I was in Tokyo closing a deal I can't even remember now." Anna's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. "She knew you loved her." "Did she?" David whispered. "Because I'm not sure I showed her. I became so obsessed with proving I was worthy of her sacrifice that I forgot the only thing she ever wanted was me." Anna squeezed his hand tighter. "Then don't make that mistake again. You have a chance now. to live differently, to build something that matters. David turned to her, his eyes searching hers. "Teach me how." And so began David's transformation. He started small. He learned the names of the security guards in his building, not just their faces, but their stories. He discovered that Marcus had a daughter studying medicine, that Carmen sent money home to her family in El Salvador, that Thomas volunteered at a youth center on weekends. He began arriving at the office earlier, not to work, but to walk through every floor. He spoke to the mailroom staff, the maintenance crew, the receptionists, people he had passed 1,000 times without seeing. And what shocked him most was how much they had to teach him. Carlos, the night janitor, showed him how to fix a broken elevator panel with nothing but duct tape and patience. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one, Mr. Miller," he said with a knowing smile. Linda, the receptionist, taught him about efficiency. "You executives waste hours in meetings that could be emails. We could run this company in half the time if you just listened." David listened, and he learned. But his greatest lessons came from Anna. She brought him to her neighborhood, introducing him to the community center where she volunteered on weekends. There, David met families struggling to make ends meet, single mothers working 3 jobs, kids with brilliant minds trapped in underfunded schools, elderly people who had built this city with their hands but were now forgotten by it. At first, David felt out of place. His expensive watch, his tailored clothes, his entire presence screaming privilege. But Anna guided him gently, showing him how to listen without judgment, how to help without condescension. One Saturday, they served meals at a soup kitchen. David stood beside Anna, ladling soup into bowls, meeting the eyes of people who had nothing yet still smiled and said thank you. An old man paused in front of him, studying his face. "You're that Miller boy, aren't you? The one who built the big technology company?" David nodded, suddenly ashamed of his wealth. The man smiled. "Your mother was proud of you. She used to clean my daughter's house, always talked about her brilliant son." He leaned closer, his voice soft. "But she also said she wished you'd slow down long enough to enjoy what you'd built. I hope you're doing that now, son." David's throat tightened. "I'm trying." The old man patted his hand. "Good, because life ain't about what you build. It's about who you become while building it." That night, David sat with Anna on the steps of the community center, watching the sun set over the city. For once, he wasn't thinking about stock prices or board meetings. He was simply present. "You're different," Anna said softly, "from the man I met in that boardroom." "I hope so," David replied, "because that man was hollow. He had everything and felt nothing." Anna rested her head on his shoulder. "And now I feel everything. And it terrifies me." She smiled. "That's called being human." David turned to her, his expression serious. "Anna, I want to do something real. I've been thinking about my company, about how we could use our resources differently." Anna lifted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" "I want to create a foundation for people like your sister, for families who can't afford health care, for kids who deserve better schools, for communities that have been ignored." His voice grew stronger, more certain. "I've spent 15 years building wealth. I want to spend the rest of my life building something that actually matters." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "David, I need you to help me," he continued. "Not as an employee, not as an assistant, as a partner. You understand these communities. You know what they need. I have the resources, but you have the wisdom. Anna's breath caught. You're asking me to run a foundation. I'm asking you to change lives with me, to build something beautiful out of all this pain. He took her hands in his. Anna Santos, you saved my company. Now help me save my soul. She laughed through her tears, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was offering. Not just a job, but a purpose. Not just a partnership, but a mission. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll do it. David pulled her into his arms, holding her as the city lights flickered to life around them. And in that moment, he realized something profound. He had spent his entire life chasing success, believing it would fill the emptiness inside him. But success hadn't saved him. Love had. Not the romantic kind alone, though he loved Anna with every fiber of his being, but a deeper love. Love for humanity. Love for the people society had taught him to ignore. Love for the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of being alive. 3 months later, the Miller Foundation officially opened its doors. The building wasn't in the financial district. It was in Anna's neighborhood, a renovated warehouse transformed into a community hub. Free healthcare clinics, after-school programs, job training centers, all of it funded by the fortune David had once used only for himself. On opening day, hundreds of people gathered. David stood at the podium, no longer the cold CEO in his glass tower, but a man who had learned what it meant to serve. My mother once told me that the measure of a person isn't how much they have, but how much they give, he began, his voice steady. I forgot that lesson. I spent years building an empire, but I lost myself in the process. It took a woman brave enough to tell me the truth, to wake me up. He looked at Anna, standing beside him, her eyes shining with pride. This foundation isn't about charity. It's about justice. It's about recognizing that everyone deserves a chance. Not just the wealthy, not just the privileged, but everyone. He paused, emotion thick in his voice. And it's about honoring the people who built me, my mother, and the woman who saved me. Applause erupted. But David didn't bask in it. He simply reached for Anna's hand, and together they cut the ribbon. As the crowd flooded into the building, Maria approached them, her face glowing with health. The treatments had worked. She was getting stronger every day. I'm proud of you both, she said, hugging them tightly. Anna wiped away tears. We did it, Carino. We actually did it. David looked around at the faces, hopeful, grateful, alive, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Love had changed him, but the story wasn't quite finished yet. 1 year later. The rain fell softly over Chicago, the kind of gentle rain that washes the world clean without violence. It drummed against the windows of the Miller Foundation's community center, where inside, warmth and laughter filled every corner. David Miller stood in the main hall, watching children paint murals on the walls, bright splashes of color depicting dreams and futures they were now brave enough to imagine. Elderly people sat in reading circles, sharing stories. Young adults practiced job interviews, their faces determined and hopeful. This was his empire now. Not glass towers and stock portfolios, but lives transformed, futures rewritten. And at the center of it all, moving through the crowd with quiet grace, was Anna. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, her face free of makeup. She looked nothing like the women who once graced David's world, polished, perfect, and empty. She looked real, and she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Anna knelt beside a little girl who was struggling with her painting. "Don't worry about making it perfect," she said gently. "Just paint what you feel." The girl smiled and began again, this time with bold, fearless strokes. David's heart swelled. He thought of the man he had been a year ago, cold, distant, surrounded by wealth but starving for meaning. That man was gone. In his place stood someone he was finally proud to be. Later that evening, after the center had closed and the rain had softened to a whisper, David and Anna stood alone in the main hall. The murals glowed softly under warm lights, the children's dreams immortalized on the walls. "Do you remember the first time we met?" David asked, his voice quiet. Anna smiled. "You mean when I whispered 3 words that changed your life?" "Changed both our lives," he corrected. She turned to him, her eyes searching his. "Do you ever regret it, leaving behind the world you knew, the power, the wealth?" David considered the question seriously. "I still have wealth, Anna. More than I'll ever need, but now I know what to do with it." He stepped closer. "And as for power, I finally understand what real power is. It's not controlling boardrooms or stock markets. It's changing one life at a time. It's looking someone in the eye and seeing them, truly seeing them." Anna's eyes glistened with tears. "You've become the man your mother always believed you could be." "Because you showed me how," David whispered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Anna's breath caught. "Anna Santos," he began, his voice trembling with emotion, "you walked into my life as a stranger, a woman the world told me to ignore. But you refused to be invisible. You risked everything, your job, your dignity, your safety, to save me from my own blindness." He opened the box, revealing a simple ring, no ostentatious diamond, no display of wealth. Just a delicate band with a single stone that caught the light like a promise. "You taught me what love really means, not possession, not transaction, but partnership, truth, the courage to be vulnerable." His eyes held hers, steady and sure. "I don't want to build another empire. I don't want to conquer another market. I just want to spend the rest of my life building a home with you. Will you marry me?" Anna's tears fell freely now, her hands trembling as they rose to cover her mouth. For a moment she couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Then through her tears she whispered, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." David slipped the ring onto her finger, and they came together in an embrace that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. The rain continued its gentle rhythm against the windows, as if the city itself was blessing their union. 6 months later, they married. Not in a grand hotel ballroom, not with celebrities and politicians in attendance. They married in the community center, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Maria stood beside Anna as her maid of honor, her face radiant with health and joy. Marcus, the security guard, walked Anna down the aisle, his eyes wet with tears. The children from the after-school program threw flower petals. The elderly reading group sang hymns in Spanish and English. David wore a simple suit. Anna wore a dress she had chosen herself. Elegant but understated, white as fresh rain. When they exchanged vows, there were no grand declarations, just simple truths. "I promise to see you," David said, "every day, to never take you for granted, to build a life where love matters more than anything else." "I promise to remind you who you are," Anna replied, "when the world tries to make you forget, to stand beside you, not behind you, to build a future where everyone is seen." They kissed as husband and wife, and the room erupted in joyful applause. Years passed. The Miller Foundation grew, expanding to cities across the country. Thousands of families received health care. Hundreds of students went to college. Communities once forgotten began to thrive. David and Anna worked side by side, not as CEO and employee, but as equals. They argued sometimes. Her fire still clashed with his pride, but they always came back to the truth that had saved them both. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about seeing each other fully and choosing to stay anyway. Maria recovered completely and went to art school, just as she had always dreamed. She painted murals for the Foundation's new centers, her work a testament to resilience and hope. Eleanor Miller lived long enough to see David become the man his mother had always wanted him to be. On her deathbed, she held his hand and whispered, "Your mother is proud, and so am I." 10 years after that rainy night in the boardroom, David and Anna returned to the Miller Technologies building, now partially converted into affordable housing and community spaces. They stood on the 60th floor, in the same boardroom where it had all begun. The mahogany table was gone, replaced by desks where non-profit workers coordinated relief efforts. The champagne and crystal had been replaced by coffee thermoses and shared meals. "Do you ever miss it?" Anna asked, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "The power? The old life?" David wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "I miss nothing, because I finally have everything." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We did something impossible, didn't we?" "We did something necessary," David corrected. "We proved that people can change, that love can transform, that the invisible can become unforgettable." Anna smiled. "And that cleaning ladies can save billionaires." David laughed, a sound warm and genuine, so different from the cold man he had once been. "And that billionaires can finally learn to see." They stood there together as the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Below them, the streets pulsed with life, messy, complicated, beautiful life. And in that moment, David realized something profound. He had thought his purpose was to build an empire, but his true purpose had been to build a heart big enough to hold the world. The rain began again, soft and cleansing, washing over the city like a benediction. David turned to Anna, his wife, his partner, his salvation. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" For whispering those 3 words, for refusing to stay silent, for saving me from a life that looked successful but felt empty. Anna cupped his face in her hands. "You saved yourself, David. I just reminded you that you could." They kissed as the rain fell, 2 souls who had found each other in the darkness and built a light strong enough to guide others home. And somewhere in heaven, a woman who once cleaned houses smiled, because her son had finally learned the only lesson that ever mattered: that the measure of a life isn't what you build, it's who you become while building it. He thought it was just one last meeting, but it became the beginning of everything. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories of love, redemption, and second chances. Because sometimes the greatest transformations begin with a whisper from someone the world forgot to see.